All right, this Hangout on Air is live. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining this month. Just to be respectful of everyone's time, I'll dive right in with some of the guests we've asked to be here, but we want to hear from everybody. I specifically asked Michael Lynn to be here this month, and Charles Edge. Michael, maybe you want to give a quick introduction for people who may or may not know you.
Sure. Client platform engineer at Facebook. Go by the names Frogger, Mikey, Pudquick on GitHub. Speak at a lot of the conferences. And if you've stolen someone's Python gist, it's probably 80% chance it was one of mine.
True. Charles, how about you?
Hey, I'm Charles Edge. I'm that guy from Cryptid, and I'm the director of the marketplace for Jamf, and that means that research, developer relations, API gateway things kind of report up through me.
Excellent. And for anyone who might be on the stream-only version of this, if you join us in the MacAdmin monthly channel on the MacAdmin Slack, feel free to type a message and I'll relay that to everybody on the Hangout. Otherwise, if you're on the Hangout, please feel free to ask questions, join us in conversation. So yeah, one of the things I want to talk a little bit about, I guess, Ed, you could squeak in. We're here at Google NYC. So one of the topics that makes sense for all these people is scaling and availability. They kind of go together. And I personally think that's a topic not only for people with hundreds of thousands of Macs or tens of thousands of Macs, but even if you're a smaller shop, 500, 1,000 machines, you have to figure out how to scale your services, make sure they're available for people potentially all over the globe, or even in one city. And as Mac admins, sometimes that can be a challenge to figure out how to do that. So, I guess we'll just start around. Michael, can you talk a little bit about how you scale services for your Mac users at Facebook, or whatever ideas you might have?
Sure. So I probably can't go into a whole bunch of specific details about what we do here, but I can tell you that we are in a transitioning stage at this point, and it's something that I think a lot of people should consider if they're getting into scaling, or just take a look at where you're at right now. So traditionally, we did a lot of scaling in-house, in that the infrastructure that so to give you an idea, we have lots of offices everywhere, various sizes. Not all of them have the best network connections. And so content distribution to employee devices, like I need to install software on my machine. Microsoft Office is not a terribly small install, as most of us know. As a result of that, if all of your devices are reaching out to the internet to grab your content, you, in a smaller office especially, could trivially swamp the WAN link headed out of the office and affect whatever people are doing when you're just trying to get a software to an end user device. And so the challenge with doing in-house scaling is that while you have a lot more control over it, it is a lot less flexible. Things have to go in order a lot of times. In order to build this infrastructure, this other piece of infrastructure needs to be there first. You may not be able to scale as fast as you want to. Whereas if you look at something more modern, like cloud-hosted services, for instance, you're going to be talking about on-demand scaling capability with an infrastructure that you don't have to build out, that it's globally, regionally available. And so in the position that we're at right now, we have sort of a hybrid approach. In certain environments, you may get content from we've got content distribution nodes that are hosted on one of the various cloud platforms that we can scale out. And in other environments, we'll still use our sort of on-premise solution, basically. I think going forward to keep up with growth, flexibility, all that kind of stuff, maybe consider putting more effort into making sure that all of your offices have a really decent network connection, or have QoS, traffic shaping going on, such that even if all your clients are downloading software, they're not going to totally monopolize your internet link. But there's a lot of value to be had in those cloud hosting platforms for getting your content out there. The availability, the ability to instantly spin up on demand in response to something like, oh, we really need to get this pushed out fast. Cool, we can spin up more servers to respond to more questions. Whereas with like on-premise type solutions, like if you're doing, I don't know, ESXi clusters with VMs or something like that, even though you can dynamically spin up a VM, you only have so much storage in those clusters that you've configured, and you got to wait for someone to set one of those clusters up. So yeah, we're kind of in a hybrid approach right now. Definitely feeling a lot of the issues with the self-hosted aspects of it, and I'd recommend to anybody who's doing that currently to definitely investigate and look at dynamic hosting offerings on the various globally available hosting platforms that are out there.
So that's interesting. You're moving a lot of your IT infrastructure to hosted cloud services like AWS or Google or something like that.
It's right now it's more, I mean, so we've been very open about the fact that we are a Chef Monkey environment. So like, for instance, Monkey has a middleware capability where you can host your content on S3 and stuff like that. There's plugins for lots of various hosting providers out there. And so that's the type of stuff that we're doing right now. The other, like the actual management core pieces of it and stuff like that, we're doing some restructuring there, but it's more focused around the big ticket stuff for us, the big bites. The amount of data that comes down through like our chef cookbooks and stuff like that is minuscule compared to a single install of like Fusion for a Mac or something like that. It's peanuts in compared to software installation. So going for the low-hanging fruit first, basically. But yeah, definitely with an eye towards making all of it available anywhere without necessarily having a local resource available.
Well, I like that. I think it's a good story to also remind ourselves that whatever solution you've had for however long you've had it probably seemed really good, but there's always room for improvement, and there's always there are always ways to improve these things. And it seems like sometimes people put a solution in place and like, okay, I'm happy, it works, and they never touch it again until it breaks or or falls over or something along those lines. So okay, some of the people in these rooms, particularly Ed, talking about how this is handled at Google. Like how do you scale services for your Mac customers at Google?
With Google, we rely very heavily.
It's a good answer.
Yeah, we rely very heavily on the Google Cloud. The architecture with sort of built-in scaling. I think we've had the luxury of, as we build tools, we haven't had to think about specific ways to scale what we're doing because we're building on an infrastructure that's going to automatically scale. It's going to give us global availability. You know, I think we face some of the same globalness challenges that Facebook faces. There are a lot of little offices and big offices all over the world.
But I think, kind of like Michael was talking about at Facebook, even though this is Google IT or DevOps or whatever you want to call it, and you're using Google services, you're still really a customer.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
So you have a lot of the same sort of constraints in some ways that you might be waiting for improvements to those products or.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Like we definitely, most of the time, and you know, you would think that we would have better, we get extra special support, but we don't really. We get sort of extra visibility.
We could perhaps file a bug directly in their queue, but that doesn't really get much more to it because unless it's affecting Snapchat is not going to get fixed.
Right, but also
Just to pick an app at random.
that may or may not be running on.
Well, I mean, I think we've seen Apple take this approach with iCloud. If you run something like Little Snitch, or if you're watching DNS traffic, you'll see when you run your iCloud services, they reach out to AWS, and now they reach out to Google. And for a long time, they would reach out to Microsoft Azure, which I don't know if they still use that or not. But here was Apple taking this approach of like, well, yeah, like we're gonna run this all over, kind of like Netflix as well. Netflix doesn't rely on a single cloud provider. They kind of spread it out, and I know I've mentioned a bunch before their Chaos Monkey tool, which I think is the coolest thing ever. Just like continual disaster recovery testing. Like this tool just goes out and kills a cluster of machines, and like, are we still serving? Yeah, okay, great. But I think there are a lot of people that use a single cloud provider, and that's, I don't know if it's just as good, but if you're of a certain size, it's just as good if you spread the load between different data centers. Which
I think it's definitely wise when you're starting to use cloud providers is to abstract away the cloud provider as much as possible, just for future proofing. Where I don't know, the cloud provider changes in some way you don't like, or another cloud provider is better, or you want to use multiple cloud providers in the back end, and it's easier to do that if you've decided at the beginning that you might want to do that than trying to shoehorn, a decade of whatever, years of application development into one provider.
Yeah. Funny thing is for me is that I've been so familiar with the Google offerings. Now I'm in an environment that's very heavily AWS, and I kind of need a translator sometimes. Like, what is that? Can someone explain that to me in the Google term? Oh, now I know what that is. Got it. Right. I understand. And then one of the other perspectives I wanted to get was to hear from Charles Edge. So Charles, you're in the position, you and your team are in the position of being a software provider, and you sell your software to different companies, and you have to go in and advise them on running your service securely and how to make it scale given their size and the availability of it. I'm curious, given this is Google and Facebook, they're in control of their destinies and they're in control of their networks. You have to offer advice to a company that you're not in control of, and you want them to have the best experience with your product. I'm curious to hear how your teams do that.
I would say that that's a changing story right now. Previous to the last year, most of our clients were on-prem, and at this point, more and more of our clients are moving to the cloud. And well over 90, probably 5% of our net new clients last year were cloud, and we're moving hundreds of customers over to our cloud environment a month. So I think our unique challenge is actually scaling our cloud, which, much like a lot of the environments that you guys are talking about, originally that was a monolithic web app that was running in the cloud, and more we're actually trying to break it down, which oddly enough leads to total vendor lock-in. So the very idea that we could actually move away from our cloud vendor anymore is becoming less and less of a thing, because we're actually using their specialized services. So instead of having a database cluster, we're just directly using cloud-based databases. Instead of having a Tomcat cluster, we're just straight up using CloudFormation templates and spinning things up. And from build automation to analyzing data to every aspect of the software development cycle and hosting is there's now specialized services, whether that's automated key exchanges as you're breaking things into microservices, or even just caching, So I would say the bigger you get, and as you get to the point where you've got millions and millions of devices that are checking in at a specific URL or specific cluster, the more you have to break things up, because one cluster is not going to be capable of doing it all.
Have you had any resistance to moving people from on-prem to the cloud for good reasons or bad. I imagine there are people that might need to stay on-prem for regulatory reasons or something. Yep. But I also suspect...
Yeah, we have lots of resistance for good reasons. And for I would never judge their reasons. You know, there's only good reasons, I think. But
I suspect there are people just like are afraid of the cloud for some reason and hear that and just react in terror and say like, no, you're not taking my server away from me.
Right. My favorite are cloud providers who are afraid of the cloud, you know. But yeah,
just afraid
for people who yeah. For people who really want to host their own stuff, you know, there's all kinds of crazy use cases that I see out there, like, oh, we need to wipe all of our web app servers every month for regulatory reasons, you know, things that we're not going to probably do in our environment for them. So, so for them, scaling those monolithic apps, I mean, we are definitely hyper focused on breaking our stuff into components and microservice-y parts. So more and more it's, well, if you need your own Memcached cluster, then you can put that over here. Or here's, you know, how we're breaking apart APNS traffic so that that queue lives on its own potentially collection of boxes, because if you've got, you know, 150,000 devices checking in once every 5 minutes, then, you know, you need that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm kind of stunned to hear an environment. I don't know what the regulation is that would require people to wipe their web servers every month, but there are a lot of regulations that I don't know about. But that sounds like sort of like a microservices / Docker solution.
Yeah, that's fully Dockered.
Yeah, and you know, speaking of on-prem, I think I saw some news that doesn't Amazon now have some way of running AWS on premises?
I don't know the answer to that. But if they did, I wouldn't think that all of their random services that we may or may not be using, from SageMaker to Glue for ETLing data to, I mean, they have so many microservice-y type of functions that I don't see a way that you could run. I could see a way that you could have like a Lambda server that you host in your own network, or an EC2 type of appliance. But, you know, the idea that you could actually talk to all of those services is kind of challenging.
I think Victor had some sort of answer there.
Victor.
I was just saying that I think they ship you like a container and put it in your backyard. And a few other services like that.
Do they have a hovercraft drop it off? Like a drone just comes over and drops it down, and satellite uplinks?
Yeah, that would be interesting. I don't know. But they have a lot of like private offerings. I mean, like they have the cloud, the government cloud version, right? And it has like special requirements. And it's like, I don't know, as a vendor, we're seeing more and more people who are like, you know, we need to host this on premise because like we're a financial company or whatever. But in reality, like you keep digging and they're like, well, everything we have is on GCP, right? So it's like, as a vendor who runs something on GCP, it's much easier to say, sure, I can package your SaaS for like this other project. But in reality, like you have the same bits. The hard part about on-prem is like, somebody has CentOS and it's configured in a specific way, and somebody wants Ubuntu, right? And just too many options.
Yeah. We're definitely looking at being able to feature toggle. Like if you set a feature on, then it will use our cloud service to process that, like moving the MDM queue as an example into its own microservice. And then if you set that feature toggle to off, then it'll just use the built-in mechanism that it's always used. So I think that's kind of how we're addressing on-prem versus cloud installations, because we will always have very large customers using on-prem servers.
Okay. And what's the advice that you give them?
cluster everything, right? But there's always a single point of failure as you cluster, and then there's also a latency drag to clustering. So, you add that second, that third, that fourth SQL server. Now you've got all those servers trying to keep in sync. They're, the next thing you know, you're moving metadata off to its own network. The next thing you know, you're breaking yet another component up, and then you're hot citing or cold citing, and every single one of those things not only adds cost, but it also adds a definitive speed bump. And like we just had a thing where we realized that we had enabled something, but we hadn't built it into the config files. So in the next version that ships tomorrow, I think, there will be like a 90% reduction in database sizes. And
wow.
Just continually looking for and having people hyper specialized in, well, you're the database person, you're the database quote unquote architect, whatever.
So you would say this trend of these large cloud providers, Google and Amazon and Microsoft, making their internal networks available to the world for rent. This has been a boon for you.
Oh, I think it's been a boon for everyone. The next stage in that is breaking everything up into much smaller components so that you can use the services that comprise the app,
Yeah, right. Yeah,
because to the example earlier of building a bigger and bigger database cluster, it's like, why would you build that at all? You can just use a database as a service now. So
yeah. Does that affect non-US customers for you, particularly in Europe with the new GDPR regulations? Are they unable to go to the cloud because of that?
We have a different hosting environment in each one of those locations.
Okay.
So it's just added cost for us to maintain and develop and upkeep all of those. But if you're in Germany, you're using an environment there. If you're in Australia, you're using an environment there. If you're in the US, you're using an environment here. Some of the services you have to start with, like US East 1 on Amazon as an example. And then you can replicate them out from there. So there's complications around some of that kind of stuff.
Does that affect you at Facebook, Michael? Like GDPR regulations, when those kicked in, did you have to do different things on your clients reporting data back up to your servers in Europe, or?
We have some stuff in place in terms of legal requirements for different regions for clients, how we do things differently on them. That was already in place. The GDPR stuff that we already had, like we've got logs that come back from the clients and stuff like that. We specifically don't record, like, if your device is off network, it's not on a corporate network or something like that. We don't actually even record what your private IP address of your client is at home, because that's potentially revealing information. I think we went a little overboard in some instances on it, but we're pretty good there. One thing that I was just thinking about that hasn't really come up in this conversation, that's a big difference between on-premise versus cloud services too, is that on-premise in a lot of ways allows people to cheat from a security standpoint. Hey, it's in my internal network. I don't have to worry about security. I can just have HTTP filing up, serving this stuff up, and anybody can grab whatever. And that's something to actually be said as a very positive result of looking into or moving to cloud services, if that's the state that you're in right now, is that any protections that you gain or add to yourself to take advantage of content that's coming from outside the network if you then consume that internally on your network, like if you move to all cloud hosted stuff, if you stop treating the corporate network any different from random internet as a whole, then you're just secure everywhere, and you don't have this like dual layers, like dual levels of security on there. And I think there's a lot of benefit to come from that. So even if you're not looking at if you're doing on-premise and you're not doing hosted currently, maybe look at what the standards are in terms of content delivery, and make sure you're at least hitting those marks on there, because as many, gosh, what was it, Experian, or the one that was just in the news?
Yeah, that's an amazing story.
Oh my God, that security story on there, if you haven't read the findings on it, is insane. And it's literally the phone call is coming from somewhere else in the house type situation, where they were camped out on the network for forever. And so you just literally don't trust your corporate network. Everything should be encrypted in transit end to end for your clients, whether it's coming from a on-premise solution or not. That's I think the other side of this coin in terms of scaling is scale secure, start secure. Don't say, oh, we can get away with it and do it later. Do it now.
Yeah, totally agreed. And I'm sitting here with some of the people who were real early advocates of that, with the VR philosophy, zero trust networking. So sort of part of that question again is, did GDPR affect any of the way that you work? Did you have to do something different in Europe, or?
I don't think we changed anything on the client side to the reporting. Sorry?
Oh, I was gonna say, I don't think we did. Like our actual work, like not that at Google, I don't know, but like what we do was reviewed for GDPR and was not.
Yeah, I mean, we looked at, but I think all the data we collect isn't accessible by everyone in the company to begin with. It's locked down fairly well. Like only certain team have access to certain bits of data that we collect to begin with. So it's not like collecting all this data is revealing it to large groups of people. It's a very limited set.
It's employee data, which is different. It's still restricted, but it's different from data and user data.
Okay, so sounds like everyone's in agreement that scaling nowadays basically means cloud services. Go use some cloud service. I'd love to know if anyone who's on this call joined because they're struggling with this or ramping up to shift from on-premise to a cloud service, and would care to talk about that or ask questions.
While people are thinking, I not necessarily moving to the cloud for scaling, but with our Puppet infrastructure, we used to have a bunch of master Puppet servers internally, and all the clients would connect to the servers, the manifest, and the servers compile it, download, blah blah blah. With the whole beyond corp movement and the non-trusted network, we had to figure out a way to have the clients talk to the servers, and we thought, well, that's dumb. Let's just don't have servers. So we changed to the standalone sort of system where no more servers, which is one way to scale, is to get rid of the servers entirely. Doesn't work on all, obviously that doesn't work on all the systems, but certainly for something like Puppet, where it's just a manifest of here's a pile of files we can send, and that's easily scalable. You just throw that up on a server somewhere. The clients download that, verify it, and I guess in some sense we went from like 15 Puppet servers to 110,000 Puppet servers in some sense, but it is one way to sort of circumvent the scaling issue.
Yeah,
110,000 servers. A lot of them are down.
That's true.
A lot of the time.
Yeah, not a really good uptime on that.
I actually like that story because one of the buzzwords nowadays in cloud infrastructure is serverless, where serverless really means a ton of servers. But this actually is serverless. You got rid of all the Puppet servers.
Right.
That's pretty cool.
Right now there's one system that watches our internal code repository, and anytime there's a change, it just pops a new thing down on a website, that a file serving platform.
And that happens to be comprised of hundreds of servers.
Sure, but that's managed by some really smart people that do really good things, and I don't have to worry about that.
Very cool.
Sometimes I'm worried that none of us have to worry about any of it, and when you know the people who do have to worry about it, you're like, I'm now really afraid.
or the opposite, you're really inspired.
True that.
So if no one has questions about that, one last thing I would ask from some of the people here. If you had advice for someone who was moving from on-prem to the cloud because of scaling issues, they're a small company and they're ramping up, they're doubling in size, whatever the case, what would be the sort of top item that you would advise them on? Let's start with Michael, maybe.
Be familiar off the top of your head with the concept of zones of availability. It's pretty standard across all the cloud hosting platforms that they guarantee uptime, but they don't guarantee uptime at a specific location necessarily, at least maybe not to the level that you're hoping for. So get yourself familiarized with whatever the tool sets are with either the specific cloud platform that you're looking at, or if you're trying to go more generalized or whatever, like, availability is probably the biggest one. Also look into what are your options for spinning up on demand. So like the GCP that was mentioned earlier, the Google platform, that one, I think it has automatic resource spin up capabilities on there. So that's a really cool feature. Not necessarily every cloud platform has that as an offering. And then you'll also have to take into account the cost aspect of it. In-house, oftentimes the cost is either hidden or consumed within other budgetary items elsewhere. We were going to put that stuff in that office there anyways. You got to be looking at your data ingress, egress. If you're doing content delivery, how much stuff are you shipping? Are you being efficient with what you're shipping? If you're using something like Monkey and you have a bad definition in there for what the installed state is, are your clients constantly re-downloading and reinstalling the software over and over again and potentially costing you money? If you're part of a modern tech company of some sort that has a product offering that is out there and takes advantage of cloud platforms, go talk to may have already got a real sweet budget of a deal in terms of content hosting that you can be a drop in the bucket compared to what your company is shipping as a product, and sort of ride for free on the prod budget from a hosting standpoint. Yeah, and then security. Like S3 bucket, I think they just finally made it where you can have a default security configuration for all the buckets in your organization and stuff like that. Like, it's a constantly evolving landscape, and be aware of what you put out there, that if you're not paying attention to how you've configured your security, then maybe think about what you've put out there. You know, if you're putting out a software installer, is there anything proprietary in there, or is it just a license key or something like that that you could get rid of, and otherwise it's just installation media. So yeah, be aware of the security of what you're putting out there, because a lot more people are constantly scanning the subnets for these cloud providers to see if there's any sort of unprotected content hosted out there. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, we could, as we sometimes do, but we could revisit a whole session on just security, like every month. So yeah, that's good advice, and it sounds like some of that was hard-learned advice on your part. It sounds like you lived it. Can anyone add to any of those tips for people who are looking to scale up or move to the cloud? Things to look out for?
Pick up a programming language, or at least something like Terraform. A lot of the stuff that cloud providers do are just APIs. So, like knowing, and they expose everything through a web interface where you can go and click on something, but you have to do it more than 5 times. And now it's much easier to write 10 lines of Python or something. And Terraform is really a great option because it tries to work specifically towards those APIs, and it's your chance to rewrite all your infrastructure in a way that it's documented. as opposed to all the on-prem stuff that you had. So,
that actually brings up a really good point, which is unfortunately, I think a lot of on-premise infrastructure was in many environments unique, manually set up. So when you're looking at these cloud platforms, you're talking about automated provisioning should be what you do. So yeah, like Terraform, like you describe the features of your server and it self-configures itself, rolls itself out, or whatever you're looking at, programming languages, but definitely look at configuration management or whatever the language of provisioning is for the service that you're looking at. Don't just be like, I need to be able to upload a raw boot volume to a service. If that's your goal for setting up a cloud hosting solution for yourself, you're in for a lot of pain.
Yeah. Use the pre-configured stuff, and the stuff the stuff for the security is being managed by someone else, or the cloud hosting provider, because their security team has a vested interest in keeping everything extremely secure, and they're honestly probably better than your security team. So
yeah. And that's a great point from Victor, is that all of these services have some kind of API, and it's there for you to go automate all this stuff to your heart's content. Speaking of cloud providers, one that I think a lot of people forget about in the mix is DigitalOcean, and they just had an announcement this morning that they now offer Kubernetes containers and clustering, and I thought that was really cool. DigitalOcean is a good provider, sometimes at a smaller scale, and sometimes they're later than other providers, but when they do come out with something, you know they've thought about it, and it's solid when they release it. So, and their documentation is always great. And I was reminded of that when Victor said APIs, because DigitalOcean's another one where just everything is available to you to just go out and automate. So yeah, that was a great point. Charles, anything from your side that, again, possibly from hard fought and won experience in advising people on scaling?
Yeah, you can I mean, when you're automating, don't forget every single test case that you can't think of.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you end up, I mean, not that you can think of every case that you can't think of, but it's easy to over-automate yourself into an outage that you cause.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah, I mean, moving everything to the cloud is a huge benefit, but of course, at the same time, you can sort of hit the wrong button and destroy yourself pretty quickly as well. So I think that's another good point, is to, have a test environment and, learn how to roll things out slowly in stages and into test and then production, possibly even then slowly from test to production, not all at once. Right. Any questions for all of the experts here?
Where? What?
Stop. Yeah. So just looking at some of the scroll back in Slack, no real questions around scaling, but back to the security points as always. Following in Chrome and Mozilla's footsteps, Safari Technology Preview 71 now supports FIDO2 with CTAP2 keys like Yubico. And what that also allows is the WebAuthn protocol. So I think that's a really great sort of like watch this space for anyone unfamiliar with WebAuthn, that relies on the biometrics in your device, and you can do like real passwordless authentication, which is pretty cool. I will give a quick plug to webauthn.io from Duo. If you want to test and just do a quick login and see what it looks like to use Face ID or Touch ID, or
make sure and change that sponsor flag.
Yeah, now I've just changed the sponsor flag in YouTube. Paid placement. But no, it's free.
Yeah,
It's free, but you can use the biometrics in your device and see what it looks like to actually log onto a web service without having to type a password. So I think that's pretty cool. And I know more and more companies are kind of looking into this. Yeah, Victor says in Slack, coming to macOS login window in a decade. But I have to admit, Touch ID is really nice. It's not the same thing, but it's a nice local authentication, especially you've authenticated, you come back from lunch, you have your screensaver, touch, boom, wakes up. That's so pleasant.
Sounds nice.
And yeah, sounds nice. Also in Slack, another place to go look is demo.yubico.com/webauthn is another WebAuthn test bed if you want to see what that
And
looks
you just
like.
give them a username and password, and they validate it for you.
Exactly.
Perfect.
Exactly.
And your credit card and social security number while you're at it.
Yeah, of course.
Cool, well,
and mother's maiden name. And
It's just the last four of your social.
yeah,
Not the whole thing.
not the whole thing. Cool. I know. I was looking at something. It was an event last week that I don't know if anyone went to. NYC Metro Jamf User Group, December was last week. I don't know if anyone attended that. It's always cool to be on the lookout for these local meetups. I think Empire Hacking is tomorrow. They do like a whole half-day thing. So if you're in the Gotham area, there are a lot of cool events. And I know, what was the thing I ran into you at? I don't even remember what that was.
So it's
That was like a one-off,
scaling. So it was a Fleet Smith.
but it was
Datadog.
Fleet Smith sponsored, but I don't remember what the name of that was. And it was like, I don't know if it's a one-off or they're going to redo it, but
Scaling with SaaS or something.
yeah, there was another,
Scaling securely with SaaS.
but there was yeah, but I don't know if they're going to repeat that
Oh.
event. It was like, hey, MacAdmins, we're doing this thing, come show up. So a bunch of people did. Bread Finance. It was hosted at Bread Finance. I have no idea.
scaling with SAS or
SAS.
SAS?
SaaS.
So
Either way.
yeah, but a lot of good friends. Fleet Smith was there, and yeah, like you said, Datadog. Good crowd. So we're always on the lookout for other events. Speaking of events, we have this is December 2018. How long have we been running this now? We did December 2010 or 11. 2011.
Yeah.
Been at this. It's a pretty good run.
Yeah.
It's pretty good. So yeah, I guess what events do we have coming up? We're looping around into the new year, as far as I can tell, as far as MacAdmin events, right? So we'll be back to
MacAdduc's in
Mac-
March.
Oh, that's
a
right,
little
they
bit
moved
later
it.
this year.
yeah,
A couple of days before the Brexit deadline. So we'll see how that goes.
right under the wire. That's cool. Yeah, that's right. MacDuck, Penn State, I guess, will be after that.
Yeah.
June or July.
And the Mac DevOps Vancouver is also in
Oh.
June or July. June this year? I forget.
Yeah, that
June.
June. Sometimes that gets stepped on by WDC or something.
Hey, they put the dates out first.
I know.
Apple needs to.
Yeah,
Watch
Apple could
Step
announce a little bit earlier, probably. But anyway, those would be the first batch to look forward to.
I think there's nothing else in spring. I guess. Yeah.
You spoke at MacDuck last year, I think, right?
Yes. Or I attended. I forget. I
Are
might
you
have-
submitting for this year,
No,
2019? Anybody?
I'll probably go.
That'll be the first one. MacAdduck.
I'm gonna say.
I'm gonna go.
I might go.
I've never been on it. Might be one
It's
off.
not. It's a meetup sort of slightly different group of people. Let's
Yeah.
all go.
Well, go. Everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody
all
listening
You're all
to
invited.
this.
To register and pay money and get your own hotel room and flights.
Yes.
But you're invited.
All right. Any questions from the group before we wrap this up on any topic, not just scaling and cloud services? Say going once, twice. Thank you, everybody. Have a great holiday. Have a great new year, and we'll see you in January, I guess.
You
Yeah.
too, Ed. And
All right. Thanks everyone for joining.
Bye.
Bye bye.